It's always really, really moving. In 2000, it's even more than 20 years, at the university, René Descartes, and in collaboration with the local forces, CNRS, but also universities like Hanoi and in Vietnam and Montpellier, we did a search, a bio-guided research, and identified non-toxic molecules able to reverse inflammatory signature of senescent cells. I underscore non-toxic, because there were many molecules doing this job, but they were all quite pretty toxic. So in the heart of the rainforest in Vietnam, at the border with China, people eat plants like chimpanzees in Africa to purge themselves, to treat themselves, to cure themselves, and to prevent the consequences of mosquito bites. So, in fact, these plants are collected every year by ethnobotanists and purified. So the discoverer of Taxotere, who was the chief of the Institute of Substances Naturelles in Paris, granted me 100 of these extracts and confined me to a very nice chemist with whom I tried to find a molecule among 2 million of molecules, and we hadn't artificial intelligence at the time, in order to find one who did the job, which was what? Reverse the senescent phenotype for the part concerned by its pro-inflammatory signature. So in fact, we found a monoterpene. We didn't know absolutely nothing about this. And we, thanks to a student, I always acknowledge, Anthony Marconi, we identified the same in Citrus sinensis peel extract, thanks to a thing that is called botanical genus, that I think it's fantastic that nature has such things. So these terpenoids are small molecules, and I thank very much Alejandro Ocampo for having raised small molecules in nutraceuticals just before the coffee break. Because these small molecules are, in fact, organic compounds that are able to regulate not only biological processes, but in particular inflammation. And they can be natural or artificial. In any case, they can be administered orally. That means already that they are enhancers. And in fact, in the case of D-limonene, the interesting story is that D-limonene is only a prodrug. The real drug is the metabolic result of the digestion of catabolism of D-limonene, that is pyrulic alcohol, who does the job, apart the psychotropic job that we will see apart. They are considered different from biologics, but may have similar effect, and I would like to underscore today that they are probably the historical alternative to biologics. A valuable strategy in prevention of aging markers expression should dispose of a non-toxic anti-inflammatory device in the body, because it's a multi-organ action that this molecule is promulgating. In fact, as we all know from literature, inflammation is at the base at the same time of cell aging and cell senescence. So in contrast to young individuals, aged ones have this elevated cytokine level, this interleukin-6, but also TNF-alpha. Obviously, centenarians are a different story, but because centenarians overexpress TNF, we know that, but for a completely different reason. So D-limonene is able, as we will see in the clinical studies I will present, to reduce, importantly, pro-inflammatory cytokines. And D-limonene is able, through a mechanism that we will look at, and it touches very profoundly to cytoskeleton, to inactivate the premise of the overexpression of these cytokines. So altogether, these were becoming some really perturbing, contradictory, sometimes effects that we wanted to clarify in a sort of smooth reasoning. So D-limonene is able to reverse inflammatory markers of senescence, and here we come to our cytoskeleton story. What you see there, in fact, is a pre-stressed cytoskeleton. That is the condition we are in endothelial cells of the skin. And you see that the co-localization with an adhesive molecule expression is nearly none, in the sense that normally a cell that is relaxed in a status that is called pre-stress, that means able to receive a stress and respond. This is an activity that you see in cancer cells, that you see when you do a stimulation with TNF-alpha or any other cytokine, pro-inflammatory cytokine. And you can reset this condition of actin polymerization by using D-limonene, this small molecule, this monoterpene we had identified. We used as control, as I didn't know about the molecule Evan Snyder was talking about, we used cytokalasin D. This was our control. So, in fact, no, it's here. No, it's there. No, it's here. So this is a historical slide. I didn't change it. You see how we were thinking 20 years ago in a very causal way. The basic mechanism of the action of D-limonene is the inhibition of the farnesylation of Rho and all the small G proteins. So this was inhibiting the expression of the adhesive molecules at the surface of the endothelium, and therefore the recruitment of activated leukocytes, thus interrupting diapedesis. AstraZeneca at the time was selecting the same type of inhibition of adhesive molecules using monoclonal antibodies, and it absolutely didn't work. And their rate of inhibition of the process was not beyond 20%. Here we are at 80% of inhibition of the process. And it is not toxic. And it is not costly. So we were in a sort of competitive advantage, but this is just a chimera, because in fact you can't compete. So we went further to a clinical study supported by the European Commission, the RISTOMED study, in which we challenged 138 elderly people, 65, 85, and from 3 countries, France, multi-scattered study, Germany and Italy, and compared different nutraceutical supplements to this D-limonene that I produced for the first time as a sort of soft gel capsules like omega-3s, looks like that. Now, the results were quite striking, and not only we had an inhibition, a significant inhibition of interleukin-6, but also, in particular, of fibrinogen. If you remember COVID, fibrinogen was really the game staker of the whole syndrome, the intravascular disseminated coagulation, where the people were dying from. So biomarkers of cardiometabolic syndrome, we thought diabetes and thrombosis were also engaged. And in fact, as you see, HOMA-IR and insulin were also very much interested by this D-limonene effect. D-limonene is an anti-inflammatory agent in the gut. Why the gut? And here we come again to the neurodegenerative diseases. Because in fact, when we did preclinical work with D-limonene in a rodent model, we observed that it was inhibiting NF-kappa B, and that, in fact, it was completely reversing colitis damage chemically induced by TNBS. So, in fact, we thought we should look at the gut barrier. Maybe something is going on there. And with colleagues of the Charité in Berlin, who were participating into the European project, we looked at the electrical resistance of the enterocytes of the barrier and found out that, in fact, D-limonene was able to repair a leaking gut, an in vitro model of a leaky gut. Concomitant to this, the consequence was, in patients this time from the RISTOMED study, a sort of modulation of the ratios between beneficial and non-beneficial strains, modulating vitality. Vitality is a new criteria that has been, maybe you know about it, that has been issued by Matteo Cesari, by the WHO, composing what we now think it's the intrinsic capacity, and it is contributing very much to the gut-brain crosstalk. So I won't go into it, but these were data that were comforting the idea that leaky gut, representing the rupture of tolerance, was at the end the real on basis of stress and cortisol. This is the first, first agent that is disrupting gut, of neuroinflammation and sickness disease. What is sickness disease? Sickness disease is something that apparently has to do with mood, but really it remembers me very much several statements of Evan Snyder just before me. In fact, all these symptoms are symptoms believed to be the result of a leaky gut and not at all of neurological origin, in particular chronic fatigue syndrome. Let's go some minutes to the psychogen effects of D-limonene because they are extremely interesting, and I worked with etologists on them. So in a model of non-pathological stress, what is that? You put a rat into a cage in which it is illuminated by light. The rat hates light. It wants the obscurity and stay with its companion. And you leave it alone without companion, and it has a maximum stress. It's totally freezed and can't even consider to look right and left. The vibrissa are completely here. They are completely in a frozen state. Maybe you don't see it, but you give D-limonene, and the ludic and motivational aspects of this animal change within 10 minutes. It starts to play with a wheel, and it starts to move. And we also measured all the evidently parasympathetic and sympathetic reaction and published this, and didn't really very much know what to do with this. What we learned from some Japanese paper that has been published just in time before that we filed our patent is that they injected D-limonene in the peritoneum of a mice model and found an immense increase in dopamine in the brain. So we now got the point that the motivational aspect that we had observed was just an increase in the brain. Just to make an excursion to what Evan Snyder had said, in fact, when you have a generalized inflammation, because this is the story of the leaky gut, it gets generalized, obviously also the synapses is subdued to the polymerization of actin. And so it doesn't secrete, it doesn't quench its own dopamine anymore. And if you reverse this actin polymerization that does these stress fibers that paralyze the synapses, your own dopamine is quenched and circulated in the blood, and you get again into this motivational condition. So D-limonene in human studies is treating intertwined stress and mood disorders. This is important because, in fact, we studied this very tinily, very carefully also in the RISTOMED study, and we found out that there was a gender effect, which is very interesting because there are several nutritional supplements. They have also a gender effect, but in the other sense. They are privileging the male population, and this one privileged the female population very clearly, as you can see here. Let's get in the last 10 minutes to the skin. Our surface integrity policy connected to the body, we know, and a subtle waterproof envelope that is so special as barrier. Think always in parallel to the gut barrier, because they have so many things in common. But skin is also an immense integrator between the gut metabolism and the mood. And in particular, I would rather give you the suggestion to read the papers of Ralph Pors, because he has really created in literature a momentum about skin that takes the center stage in mood disorders. That's a very interesting point. I will not go into this scheme, but he has written fantastic reviews, and he is a reference. So in our work, here we compared pyrrolic alcohol and D-limonene. We found out that, in fact, in wound healing and autoimmune disease models, pyrrolic alcohol did better. So we went to human disease that is depending from leaky gut and psychological stress at the same time, which is psoriasis. And we had dramatic changes in very short time in patients who were not responding to any drug anymore since years. So when we looked also at the evolution of the life quality index, we were not surprised. And we published this with a group of the Sapienza. Same story with the atopic dermatitis. This young lady, not only she was completely covered by the disease, but at the same time, what I thought in this person, she was 30 years old, she was 30 years old, was this evident rejuvenation effect that we observed after 10 days. We couldn't believe it. And when we looked at her leaky gut problem through the very qualitative zonulin test, it was really confirming our ideas. So, grosso modo, D-limonene is a geroprotector, but with all these connected effects, multi-organs, it's really a conundrum of effects that respond to each other. In fact, it is a farnesyl transferase activity inhibitor. So we have identified colitis and some form of dermatitis and non-pathological stress as major hallmarks that concern more, let us say, quality of life. But in fact, clinical evidence exists in intermediate psoriasis, in skin rejuvenation. I skipped all the cosmetic results we have because they are so stunning. They should be the object of a separate presentation. So when Moskalev came out, Alexei Moskalev came out with terpenates as potential geroprotectors, it was during COVID, quoting all our work, I said, oh, that's fantastic. I am a geroprotector. I had never heard the word before. And so it was even followed by another paper on monoterpenes modulating cytokines. I said, okay, and they also were quoting all my papers. So I wrote my own paper on my drug discovery story, and just showing this very intimate relationship to anti-inflammatory strategies all over, be it prostaglandins, be it pro-inflammatory cytokines, or whatever. At the end, a new avenue along with farnesylation inhibitors has opened with a recent meeting in Rome with Professor Richard Farragher. And we think today that D-limonene is really, it has now a new etiquette. It's not a geroprotector anymore, or still a geroprotector, but this has a little bit disappeared in the tableau. It's now a farnesyltransferase inhibitor. So he said, but it may turn out to reverse Progeria phenotype in organoids or even in animal models. Because, he explained me very well, in the HGPS, everybody here knows the Progeria syndrome, the molecular mechanism of Progeria, which of course I knew, but I never put it together, is consistent with this permanently farnesylated mutant form. Why is it so? And a body should not farnesylate a mutant form, but it does. So, of course, you continue to generate progerin. Together with ApoE4 and EGF1, LMNA is therefore mentioned in a new paper that I just saw with Carlos Lopez-Otin, Andrea Mayer, and Guido Kremer, we all know, is relevant to geromedicine involved in HGPS. The sole FDA-approved drug is extremely toxic. So maybe this will be soon a new future, a new avenue in order to maybe find out pharma application of this monoterpene.